As we continue to trek along through spring, we are now back with another edition of Mountaineer Report here on WV Sports Now. We are available everywhere you get your podcasts, so Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc., and also available on YouTube. Mike Asti, and I am joined by Cody Nespor as we are going to talk about the Mountaineers that are now getting an opportunity in the NFL, of course, headlined by Wyatt Milum getting drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. A myriad of other players got signed as undrafted free agents or at least got rookie camp invites. And right now, there are still a few that are kind of surprising to still be hanging out there, but likely we'll get a chance at some point. There's been a lot of work in terms of both basketball and football roster movement. We talked a lot about basketball in recent shows, but going to kind of focus on what the football program is doing on this episode of the show, because now they're starting to get some Power 4 transfers, whereas most fans were down and kind of focusing just on basketball. Now it looks like they're getting even more movement in the Power 4 transfer realm of things. But what does that really mean for Rich Rodriguez's team here in 2025? And then there's a possibility that we are in the midst of a West Virginia program experiencing the best team that program has ever had in the history of that program. And I'm obviously talking about Steve Saban's team and the Mountaineer baseball team, who a couple years ago set a wins record. They also won a Big 12 title. Obviously, last year, a super regional appearance for the first time in program history. But now, Maisie to Saban's, the debut year of a new head coach, they are on track to shatter the wins record, and then who knows what as they get ready for the postseason. So, Cody, the weather is warm. A lot is going on. I see you're growing the mustache out, so I'm liking that. How much longer are you going to be keeping the mustache, and how are you doing?
I don't know. I never plan out my facial hair. It just happens.
Okay. You don't always have it, though. It
No,
looks like either you haven't planned it out or you've just been lazy with shaving for weeks. Either way.
it's both.
Okay. I think you can pull it off. I think you can pull it
Thanks.
off.
Thank
I
you.
might be weird with the mustache, but I think you can pull it off. I do want to start with Wyatt Milum, obviously, before we get to the rest. He ends up getting drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was in rumors for, tons of teams. Honestly, the Jaguars were one of them. He now ends up getting maybe some limelight there with Travis Hunter, obviously being their top selection, and will be able to block for Trevor Lawrence. And he already made the major claim that no one's going to touch Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence is going to have an easier time. He was getting looked at guard a lot during the NFL draft season, and people are still saying it's likely guard for him in the NFL. We both thought that maybe was a little strange because he played tackle so much in college to incredible success, but the arm length thing seems to be the issue on why he's going to be a guard. What do you think of Wyatt Milum in Jacksonville with kind of the new look Jaguars, a new regime, a new management structure, new GM, new head coach, a lot new there, and that includes Wyatt Milum. And then how you think he'll do, since it really is getting serious that it is a position change for him, at least how it appears so far.
Yeah, I think you look at the Jaguars. They have two tackles that they
Right.
extended Walker Little, who was a high round draft pick, and they drafted a first round tackle last year. So you figure Wyatt is going to move into guard, which like you said, we didn't think much of when it was at the combine, but
Yeah.
it's weird because he didn't. It was like one or two practices, not the combine, at the Senior Bowl, and it's weird that that's enough for a team to draft him in the top 100 and be confident. But that also speaks to just his overall ability as a football player.
Maybe they called Matt Moore, who tried him a lot. They tried all the offensive linemen in different positions a lot in practice, at least, but they're at WVU.
Yeah. So, so it looks like he will play guard. I mean, unless he.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about the Jags. Who knows? One of their tackles could falter and Wyatt slide in there. But yeah, it looks like he'll start at guard, which you mentioned the arm length thing. I don't. The guy the Patriots drafted in the top 10. They said the same thing about that, but he goes in the top 10 and he's a surefire tackle. And so I don't know. I never know about that kind of stuff.
Well, there's always something that people point to if there's going to be some drastic change, and it's not always fair across the board when it comes to draft prospects. That was brought up a lot, though, during the NFL draft coverage, certainly when he was selected, about the arm length. I mean, he's still a monster out there, and it is a little weird. Do you think that if the position change does not work out, because this is a franchise that is likely not going to win right away, this is going to be a rebuilding process again for the Jaguars. Maybe he won't have tons of media coverage, but maybe he will with Travis Hunter there. And this is an easier said than done change. He was an All-American at tackle, and while the analyst made it, oh, well, he'll just slide over there because he's an athlete, like that is still going to be work for him that people who are not changing positions were able to kind of just seamlessly move into their new team and new job. So with all of that said, do you think if it doesn't work out at guard that they will give him an opportunity at tackle, that he will have to potentially years from now go elsewhere? Like, is this a really risky scenario for a third round pick, or is that overblown, or do you just trust Wyatt Milum because he is an athlete? It is a position change. I mean, a third round pick doing a position change is not as common. And I think people think this is just, it's no lineman. It's not really a position change, like, say, a quarterback trying to be a receiver, like we'll get to with Garrett Green. But it is. It's a different job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's I think in that respect, Jacksonville is a good spot for him to land because, like you said, first year of a brand new regime, they're not expected to even make the playoffs, really. And so and Travis Hunter and Trevor Lawrence are going to get every headline, right, all season long.
Imagine, yeah.
And so you have to imagine Wyatt's going to get as long a leash as possible, right? I mean, if the Jaguars are extremely bad, the third round guard is going to be so far down the list of things that, I mean, nobody might even notice. So I think as a landing spot, it's actually decent for him because he's going to just get, presumably just a whole bunch of run to, hey, we're not going to be real tight about we have to win games right now and make the playoffs and all that. So just go out and play and develop. And I think that's a really good spot for something like that. And as you say, especially when he's going to be learning a new position. So I actually think, Jacksonville, being a bad team is decent for him. And hopefully for him, he helps turn it around.
Yeah, as much as we make fun of Jacksonville, though, when you think about it in their division with how things normally work in that division in the AFC South, Tennessee is obviously also doing a rebuild now with a new quarterback and trying to figure things out for their future as well. The Texans, they were the sexy pick last year and they were a playoff team, but they didn't necessarily light the world on fire.
Yeah.
The Colts are a complete mess on what they're trying to do. It looks like they maybe are going to take a swing and miss on Richardson, who's now in a competition with Daniel Jones to be quarterback with the Colts. But Jones obviously was a cast off with the Giants, and that didn't work out. So with all of that said, it's not unheard of if the Jaguars land on an 8-win season and then crawl in the playoffs, or they can win the division with 8 wins. We've seen division champions have under. So, yes, there's not pressure now, and I don't think anyone's going to get fired if they have a losing season. They're certainly not going to blame Wyatt Milum if they have a losing season. This is about the next decade, not really this season for the Jaguars franchise. However, Cody, if they win a couple swing games and win those divisional games, and then they're all of a sudden midway through the season, they already got 5 or 6 wins, the pressure may ramp up a bit because then they could get in the playoffs. And they're not exactly going to say, oh, we don't want to get in. Obviously, they're going to then try to get in. So then if you have a miscue and they lose a playoff opportunity by 1 game, even if it's year 1, then, then the cameras can get on you a little bit more. Then you're going to be doing some interviews in the locker room. So I do think it's a solid spot, though, in all reality, because the other franchise that was rumored to him a lot, certainly when we were even hearing during draft coverage, and obviously there were several teams that talked to him throughout the process, but the Eagles were in a lot of rumors for Milum, and that would have been a 180 flip of we're building a dynasty, and if you can't change positions, we got about 3 months for you to figure it out or we're done. So Maybe they were scared about that scenario. They obviously still drafted well. Their line is fine. Maybe he could have hit himself there, but this is seemingly a solid spot for Wyatt Milum. And I also would figure that anybody who drafts somebody in the third round, because the way the NFL draft normally works, I mean, if you're a third round pick, that franchise, they're not forcing you to start day one. It's not like the way the world is on your shoulders, but they are assuming you're a future starter. The third round pick is not just some flyer like a fifth, sixth, seventh round pick. They're assuming you're going to play for this franchise for years to come. And O-linemen maybe even assuming you're going to re-sign there if things work out. So that does exist for Milum now. But maybe they also thought, okay, we are invested into this guy. We know he played tackle. We know he did it at an elite level. We'll try guard. It's not like if we're in year 2 and guard's not working out, maybe then they would consider something else depending on how the rest of the roster looks, because they do want him to succeed, and maybe they'll figure it out in camp. Who knows? But it does appear a guard life for Wyatt Milum. WV Sports Now here, Mountaineer Report. Again, you can find us everywhere you get your podcast. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, as we're talking the Mountaineers now in the NFL, Mountaineers turning pro, and there were many of them, even though only one got drafted. Out of the other players that signed, obviously, that includes Garrett Green with Tampa, Austin Brinkman with the Houston Texans, Ty French and Nick Malone actually get rookie camp invites, even though they've not signed yet. Garnet Hollis gets a chance after his miserable year as a transfer addition for West Virginia, but he does get a chance because of his size. Which one of those maybe stands out to you? There were other players that I do think are eventually going to get NFL opportunities. Anthony Wilson being one, namely him really for sure.
Sean Martin.
Sean Martin should get another one, size alone, although he did regress year to year with West Virginia, but still probably will get an opportunity. They've not yet signed as you're watching this show. Maybe they will if you're consuming it later. Do any of those stand out, but they're still waiting for opportunities?
Well, the guy I love that has already signed that to stick. I think Colt Taylor will absolutely get on a roster.
Didn't mention him yet, but 100%.
He signed with the Bengals. Even if the Bengals don't keep him, I think he ends up somewhere. Just his size and the caliber of athlete he is. Certainly not a complete combo tight end, but as a receiver, like he'll stick somewhere. The other guy I love to stick, even if it's just on practice squad, is TJ Jackson, who signed with the Seahawks. Which, at his size, he wasn't going to get drafted, right? Just because, he's not defensive tackle size. But he's, we saw it last year, just motor, effort, technique. He has all those in spades, and he's absolutely even if he's, plays on special teams only or just on the practice squad, I think he has a better chance to stick around someone. And then the wild card, I wouldn't be surprised, Austin Brinkman has a 10-year career in the league, right? Because you don't know with long snappers. But
you don't know with long snappers, and hey, Rex has had a decent career. He's getting contracts. It's not like he's a perennial Pro Bowler. The Browns have signed him. I seriously think the Browns have signed him 3 times in the last 2 years. But he's getting deals. Like, I guess really you got to think about what is success for a long snapper? Is it just getting contracts, staying in the league, or do you need to have some other recognition? It's hard to equate that for a long snapper.
And it's the fewest, no team has a backup long snapper, right? So
there you go,
32 jobs. And so it's would I be surprised if Brinkman gets a job and, like I said, has a 10-year career? No. Would I be surprised if he doesn't get a job? No, because there's so few of them. But and then I assume, obviously the weird one is Garrett Green, and I assume we'll talk about him.
Yeah, we're going to get into him. I do also want to throw out there, because the other weird one, at least for his level of play as a Mountaineer, is Garnet Hollis. Now, he has the size. He is getting an opportunity because of his size. He had a decent year or two, actually, with Northwestern, and was better in the Big Ten than with West Virginia. I've heard from some anonymous former coaches, I'll just say, that he was the biggest disappointment of last season. He was the biggest disappointment as a transfer addition. He started off by saying, I'm going to be the next Beanie Bishop. Bishop turned, coming to West Virginia from the Big Ten, actually, into a consensus All-American career, big play after big play, NFL, great rookie season with the Steelers. At that time, he already knew all that, and he was, I'm going to try to do the same thing. That was his goal. He then turned around and threw a hot take out there and threatened Penn State and said, I want to, kill their soul or snatch their soul or something like that. And obviously that just turned out to be egg on his face. He had a real rough season. I mean, his highlights are penalties. He had a really rough season. And again, multiple coaches were disappointed in him. It's not the only reason why the defense was bad, but he was kind of the face of the secondary being even worse than the year before. And it's been a weakness outside of Beanie Bishop, basically. So he's getting an opportunity. We've covered him as a disappointment who maybe didn't really put full effort in, who looked like he kind of was bagging it, who didn't really look like he lived up to any hype that existed prior. Obviously, in all seriousness, there's talent there for him to have success in the Big Ten. He does have the size. Do you think he has what it takes to make it in the NFL at some point? Is someone going to be impressed with him? I'm assuming he's going to put more effort in with an NFL opportunity than he was at West Virginia, you would figure. Although final year of college, a power program, you would have figured to get more from him at WVU as well.
Yeah. No. I've said, ever since the season ended, really, that I was supremely confident he would be in an NFL camp because he's 6'2" and 200 something. But no, it's, the year we watched, it was, he was terrible.
It was so bad.
He gave up so many big plays and committed so many penalties. It's hard.
He stood out on a bad defense. He stood out so much, and the defense was really bad, but he stood out.
And they're just, it's hard to look at that and project at all professional success. But I just know, he's a big corner that can run, so I knew he was going to get an opportunity. But no, I just don't. It would take a lot, right?
He also seemed like he had an ego for a guy that wasn't good. He's throwing shots at opponents, and then he wasn't performing. But his goals are high if he's trying to be the next Beanie Bishop, obviously. The difference with Beanie, though, who also had an ego and had a personality, Beanie Bishop would back it up. And after being kind of, an afterthought out of high school and even having to go from a group of 5 before getting to the Big Ten, then wasn't used in Minnesota, got to WVU, consensus All-American, not just All-American, but consensus All-American. And then, of course, in the NFL, again, not drafted, undrafted free agent, having to get that opportunity. He had a massive chip on his shoulder that allowed him to strive for success and achieve that success. It almost felt like a little bit, and again, I don't know Garnet Hollis personally. This is off a year of covering him and obviously knowing and watching him prior to that at Northwestern. So maybe this isn't fully fair analysis, but it looked like he came off a little entitled to me early on. He came off that he thought it would be easier than it was early on. Like, they just do this for Beanie Bishop, so it's going to happen for me, like no sweat. And then he just kept getting opportunities, which was also odd, maybe because they didn't have anyone else to put in. Brown kind of knew the writing was on the wall for him and was starting to kind of send messages to players, but Garnet Hollis was still getting time. I don't know if they were just leaving him out to dry or what, but he has a chance now regardless. It's almost like the NFL said, well, you got the size, 2024 doesn't matter at all. Like they must not have watched any film.
It's him and Beanie are interesting because they're complete inverses. Right?
They are, but he brought up Beanie. That's why I bring up Beanie.
And that's
he's the one who talked about Beanie a lot.
Right. And just as a compare, like Beanie didn't get drafted because of his body, right? Because he's 5'9" or whatever.
Yep.
But he got a chance because of production.
Right.
Garnett didn't get drafted because he had no production, but he gets a chance because of his body.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Right. So it's an interesting contrast between those two. And obviously, as 1 year mercenaries at WVU, let's say, it's interesting, I think it's interesting and fair to compare them and
polar opposite years. Even
if
he didn't bring up Beanie, I think the comparison's there because Beanie had such a successful 1 year season. They both were from the same conference, and the staff and Brown and company, they even kind of build it as the same thing. Like, we did this for Beanie, we promote Beanie so we can do this again. And then that clearly didn't work out. They're all fired. Garnet Hollis was a bad transfer addition, but yet he's getting an opportunity nonetheless.
Yeah. And obviously Beanie, went on.
Oh, sure.
I think it was a day 1 starter with the Steelers, right? He started the opener, I believe. And,
he started very early on, and obviously was making plays very earlier in the season. That pickoff, against Aaron Rodgers, him signing the football. Maybe there'll be teammates again here, as coming up, and they can joke about that. So Beanie's made a name for himself that he's going to be in the NFL. I mean, I can't say with the Steelers forever, but if somehow that would separate, another team would want him. And quite frankly, Cody, if nothing else, he's certainly. I mean, he has trade value out there in the future if they ever want to go in that direction. Beanie Bishop's going to be in the league in some form or fashion. Garnet Halls needs to prove that, but you get an opportunity to prove that when you have that size. So I'm sure, Cody, there's a coach sitting out there saying, Mike and Cody, I cannot dispute the film was bad and they didn't produce and he was a disappointment. He probably got a text from these anonymous coaches that talked to me if they asked him. And I'm sure he's like, I can't argue with you. I know what you're saying. Look at him, though. I can fix him. I'm a better coach. Like, that's probably what they're thinking. Any coach at the NFL level, head coach on down, I can do it. I can fix him. I'm better than you. You didn't fix him. I will. Send him to a sports psychologist if you have to. We'll get the effort in. And quite frankly, Cody, when you get to this point as an undrafted free agent, if he shows up in any rookie minicamp or anywhere, and anything close to what the West Virginia coaches maybe were telling these NFL coaches occurs, they're done. Like, this isn't going to be, we're going to have to linger with you and give you PT because we don't have any other options like at West Virginia in 2024, and we did pay you as a transfer ad. No, the NFL is not going to mess around. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti again, Mountaineer Report. And the headliner, no matter what his NFL career is, the headliner certainly for this show, as a former Mountaineer now getting a chance at the pros, is Garrett Green. Quarterback for the Mountaineers, polarizing force. Big plays after big plays in 2023. They won the Mayo Bowl. They proved everybody wrong. And then last season, the team regressed. It was the end of the Brown era. And a lot of that was because Garrett Green regressed and did not get it done based on what he said he would do. Change positions to a wide receiver. I think that was coming anyway. Even if he had a great year, he was going to not be able to be a quarterback in the NFL. Brown kind of even alluded to that a lot. He's getting a chance now as a wide receiver. A pretty quick signing, too. So it wasn't like people aren't sure. It was a pretty quick signing within about an hour or two after the draft closed. Tampa Bay, that's kind of cool for him, too. He's going kind of home a little bit, certainly in Florida, so it'll at least have some familiarity there. Doesn't, necessarily correlate to what franchise he maybe will be with or what his path will be. There have been quarterbacks that transition and play receiver with a similar body structure, even though maybe he's still a little smaller in the NFL. What do you think of Green's prospects to have an NFL career and to make his name as a wide receiver, whether it be with Tampa or elsewhere?
Yeah. That obvious comparison is Julian Edelman.
That's the ceiling one. I hate doing it because that's a big comparison.
He's really the last guy who did that. I mean, Logan Thomas played tight end after playing college quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there's been guys. I mean,
but it doesn't happen every year, right?
No. It definitely does not happen every year for sure. No.
Yeah. Even like Antoine Randall, right?
Antoine Randall is further back for sure. Yeah.
So it's not, Garrett's chances aren't great, to put it lightly. But we know he's a superior athlete. We know he has outstanding ability with the ball in his hands. And I don't know if he can catch. If he can catch and he can catch in traffic and run routes, maybe he can stick on a team. If he can return punts, maybe he can stick on a team. But it's just a total crapshoot. We saw him play receiver 5 times his sophomore year just to get him on the field. And I think he fumbled once.
He was pretty raw at all positions then. But yeah.
But he has ability. He, like I said, he has outstanding athleticism and ability with the ball. So I don't know. He is small, and that's a big thing.
Even comparison to Edelman, he's small.
Even compared to Edelman. So that's what I mean. Like, if he can catch the ball and work over the middle of the field and not just get physically abused, like, A
You got to
team
build
might
up those
keep him on
calves.
and
You
give
should
him a
see
chance.
Edelman's calves. Like you got to be part of the Cavs squad there. I mean, it's really, really hard to predict. It's a positive sign that he was signed so quickly. He was never going to get drafted. Obviously, he did work out for several teams at pro days. The Commanders were one of them. That was a team that was in a little bit more rumors for him. Goes to the Bucks. We'll see. It also could kind of be sometimes with these situations now. Granted, it's above a camp invite, but sometimes teams take flyers on guys, just want to give it a look-see, even if they really know in the back of their mind they have no commitment. Or even sometimes you get a franchise that's kind of like the hometown franchise for that kid to say, okay, come aboard, but they really probably aren't going to sign him. Maybe that's happening here. That would kind of be his, franchise that maybe he was a fan of growing up. So that's kind of where it is with Garrett Green, certainly rooting for him. There was no chance at quarterback. I think the issue with him doing this, Cody, in comparison to when you bring up the linemen, certainly, okay, if it doesn't work out on defense, you can't build your body enough, maybe special teams, certainly practice squad. If you're Garrett Green and you're going from QB to receiver and you're still undersized, I mean, maybe you could find a spot somewhere, but like the coach has got to be thinking, if you can't maybe be a returner at some point, if you can't find yourself in this offense, is that a waste to throw you on practice squad? Could we not just sign you at any other time? Like, what do we need you there for? Separately than that, you're not going to play any other position. Like, there's nothing else for him. So it really does seem like a risky gamble. Maybe, though, for a practice squad at the very least, maybe there's a team that'll have in their mind that, hey, if nothing else, because this happens a lot, we will have Green at our disposal. And then for a game against a athletic running quarterback, we'll bring him aboard and have him run scout team. Like that could be a thought. It doesn't necessarily mean he'll have production in the NFL, but he could get money doing that. And then there's also the thought, which is where I was going to segue, and maybe this is better for Green, whether it be receiver or if he wants to go back and try to play quarterback someday, this would be the only other opportunity. It's not just the NFL right now to play professional football. There are other professional leagues out there. There are the spring leagues. Do any of these Mountaineers stand out to you that, okay, if the NFL doesn't work out, maybe it's even best for them in their career to go take a flyer at a spring league at some point, try there, because we've now seen spring leagues lead to NFL success. We've seen players that actually perform and put production up in the spring end up on an NFL roster or a camp or training camp or whatever the next fall. And it sometimes is a better path than sitting on a practice squad. So is maybe that a UFL scenario there under Anthony Beck or whoever, former Mountaineer, shout out again. Is that maybe a better path, or where you could see in a year or two, okay, Garrett Green's back as a QB in the UFL, or he's a receiver at least in the UFL, and it's not like you're going to be a multimillionaire right away, but if you want to play professional football, that might make more sense for you than trying this NFL thing out and having one scout team rep per season.
Yeah, it could actually. The guy I could see that working out for would probably be Anthony Wilson, right? Because he's another guy that like his problem is just that he's undersized. So
yeah,
I could see him, just get an opportunity to play, right? If NFL teams are just, so concerned about his size they don't even want to bring him in. If he can get on a field somewhere and just play, that could open up doors. The other guy, Ty French, he's another one like. He's got the opposite problem where he athletically and physically he's what NFL teams would drool over, but he doesn't have the production, and so it's like I could
barely power forward time.
Yeah, so like he's another one I could see go to one of these spring leagues, and if you can just get on the field and play and stand out, like that opens up more doors. He got a camp invite, but him and Wilson are the two guys I think that would just be like, just get on a field somewhere and play and see if you can make it work, and don't just labor away on practice squads or stuff like that. Like actually get on the field and try to do something.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the issue obviously is that even practice squad money might be more than UFL money. So like that's the that's the issue. That you want to be in the NFL. You want to go the path of the NFL, even if you're not really playing in the NFL or just special teams. You'd probably rather do that than UFL. But if you want to actually make a name, you want to actually produce, and you want to have that take you to the league, because we've seen that certainly more in recent years when you have a lot more connection between the leagues. And UFL is kind of embracing themselves as kind of a feeder, where that maybe wasn't the case with past pro leagues in the springtime years and even further decades ago. So maybe that is a better plan. And Anthony Wilson was that player that stood out to me as somebody who has not yet been signed or received even a camp invite. I thought he'd at least get a camp invite because he doesn't have the full build, but he has the right mentality. He's been chasing the NFL dream forever. He's been compared, and he compares himself to Carl Joseph. Obviously, that's a big ceiling. I'm not saying he's Carl Joseph, but he went to different boot camps around the country to train before last season. Like, he really is motivated this, and he again seems to have the right mentality. I'd like to bring him in and give him a look. If not, then yeah, I would think spring football would make sense for him for sure, if nothing else. And the one player that we have not mentioned yet that I do want to mention, and it's almost a sad story a little bit, because if we were doing this show a year ago, certainly 2 years ago, he was literally considered an early round draft pick for some in the NFL. He then kind of got hurt and filtered down, but PFF had loved him, and that's Aubrey Burks. So we know he had the issue at TCU and that injury scare, and that kind of ruined that season. Last year, injuries did not really get to do as much, even though he stayed around when people thought maybe he was going to leave. He stayed a Mountaineer all the way through. Has not really been productive for like a year and a half because of the health situation, but there have been flashes when he's on the field of showing that he's a presence out there, and he was kind of the mainstay and best player in that secondary for a while. As we're speaking, there's no camp invite or signing with him. What are your thoughts on the Aubrey Burke situation? Because again, if you go back to about a year and a half ago, and PFF is not the end-all, be-all. It is not the gospel. They are right on some things. They are wrong on some things. People love to use them when they support their guys and hate on PFF when it goes against what their favorite player maybe could do. So I don't want to make this like PFF is Lord Almighty here. But it's a very weird scenario. They are a national evaluator. They are embraced by NFL teams. They loved him for a while in college. He got hurt. He's never been the same since. And it now seems like the NFL is not even looking. There was not even a rumor during draft season. I hope that he gets an opportunity in the spring, and I'd imagine he would. But the NFL almost, as we're speaking right now, seems like out of the question. And I just wonder why they wouldn't even at least give him a look unless the health is worse than we know. And it wasn't reported that he had to retire from football or anything like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Obviously, the injury this year. He came back. Yeah, everybody was worried he was going to transfer or declare, and he came back to help his draft stock. And obviously, the injury, screws that up. It's kind of a scenario where he
collapsed on the field. It was a weird injury.
Yeah, it's a scenario where like he was so good a couple years ago playing deep safety.
Yeah.
And it was almost like he might have talked about this. He wanted to become more valuable by playing all three safety positions. And, he wasn't good at spear, and it's almost unfair because, he only played a few games and then he got hurt and then he didn't. So maybe he would have become really good at spear, but he wasn't as good when he wasn't at deep safety.
Yeah.
And so I think that plan backfired. And that's not on him. That's, the team didn't have a guy to play spear, so they had to move him around. And so I think, and you're right, a couple of years ago, he was, and even last year, or, before, not 2024, the year before 2024, he was highly thought of. And it's, I don't know if it's like an out of sight, out of mind because he didn't play, the last several months. And so just people kind of forgot about him or what, but yeah, it's just interesting. He's not gotten a call yet. And the other guy who actually went to the combine, Mike, was Sean Martin. And there hasn't been a lot of talk of him with teams either. And obviously it's only Monday, but
true.
I mean, they liked him enough to give him a combine invite and nobody's picked him up yet.
Yeah, it is. it just sucks for Aubrey Burks. Like, I'm rooting for him. I hope he gets an opportunity, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. He was kind of that, prototypical safety, and that's when PFF loved him. And then and the coaching staff was open about this, so I this was even out there publicly, but then I certainly can confirm it even from private conversations. He was part of the reason, if not a driving force of the reason, on why his position changed to that spear role. He wanted to do more of that, thinking that would lead him to NFL success and get more looks at the NFL, because his thinking was PFF loves me, but nobody else really does in the NFL. Like, PFF was loving him, but then the other draft analysts were not. And it was a weird polarizing thing with Aubrey Burks a couple years ago, despite being productive at the college level. So it's hard not to look back and say that was a real bad decision, especially if he was the one who wanted to do it. I know there was even criticism at that time, and this is where Brown, I think, maybe could be argued as being a little too nice to players. It almost felt like he was convinced by Aubrey, I'll do this for you as a favor because you really want to do this. It almost came across, Cody, and I can't confirm this part, but obviously he ended up staying, and there were rumors that he was going to leave. I obviously know he got more NIL money, but it almost came across like there was a meeting, and I even, walked by a little bit of it after the Mayo Bowl because they're having a little bit of a huddle. Maybe it was then, where, okay, we'll give you more money. We want you to stay. You want to do this to help your NFL stock, so we'll agree and capitulate to you if you stay. Like, it seemed like there was a compromise there, and it didn't work out. Like, he got hurt, so maybe that's maybe it is unfair, as you said. We didn't get to fully evaluate it. But even when he was there, it looked like he was a fish out of water. Brown even talked going into that season that maybe we'll change it the next game, or maybe we'll ease them into this thing, which they were easing into Penn State. So it wasn't like you could do that with an FCS week one like you'd have this year with Robert Morris. So the whole thing was a bad call in all reality.
And
I just feel like it was a bad call, and I wonder if that's regret from the coaching staff to let him do that. And I don't think it helped his career at all individually, at all.
Yeah. And it's, he was Dante Wright's guy.
Sure.
He loved Dante Wright.
Too.
And it's another, like, he leaves, goes to Troy. That's why everybody kind of thought Aubrey was going to transfer. He stays, and obviously it's a bad season. So it's, I don't think that can be understated either. They talked very openly about, like, every morning Aubrey would go and sit in Dante Wright's office and watch film with him and just talk with him about, and it's like that guy leaves and you have a bad year, and I don't want to downplay the injury, right? But was having a bad year before he got hurt, right? And it's like we keep saying, like, he was so much better as a deep safety than playing in the box. And I remember at some point one of the coaches was like, well, he's a great blitzer, so we want to use him there. And it's like, I don't know, there were so many things where I don't know. It feels, in retrospect, it feels like Dante Wright, and maybe more than retrospect, it feels like Dante Wright was the one kind of holding all of that together and making it work. And obviously he goes, and the secondary was terrible. So maybe there's more truth to that than just what we've seen with Aubrey. But it is, it does just suck, right? Because, Aubrey's a pleasant young man. He was always very thoughtful, and he was very deliberate in coming back to better his draft stock to go fulfill his dream, which, hopefully he still gets a chance to do.
Yeah, Mountaineer Report here, WV Sports Now, Cody Nespor, Mike Asti. I also am right with you that if I had to bet money on one player, and this is outside of Wyatt Milum, that will be on an NFL roster somewhere and will likely have a career, it's Colt Taylor. Just that size. He's the big body. Brown always joked that, that he was open by birth, I believe was the phrase. Yeah. Open by birth. Like, he is. And you could argue that maybe he should have been more productive open by birth. Like, he put out there, if you remember that presser where he was, I'm going to have 50 catches and have the best season for tight end in program history. And we're all like, man, just so you're doing the math here, there's only so many games. It's not like all the passes are going to go to you. That seems hard. And I remember that was kind of broached to him. Somebody was like, man, that would be, this many catches per game. And that's really rare for a tight end. And he well, but I just have lofty goals. He didn't hit the lofty goals. I do admire people who having big goals. You try a date at 10 and you end up at an 8, you're still happy. You're at an 8. So he had a solid year. He had a solid tenure at WVU. He was able to get more opportunity than he would have if he stayed in the SEC at LSU. He has the size, though. I don't know if he fits the Bengals, but if he's with Joe Burrow, he'll find out a way to use him. I think that size is going to get him contracts, going to get him looks. Some team's going to want him to do something. And he even showed an ability to block last year. It wasn't like he was just a pass-catching tight end. He even got offended when you would call him that. He feels he's an overall tight end. So I think it would be hard to believe that he'd be out of there. And if he's out of there and he only has practice squad invites, that's a guy that I would say, forgetting the money part, go to the UFL and be an all-star. Like he could really produce there. But I think he'll have an NFL career. That size alone should get him an opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and to Cole's credit, for a 2-year career, when I was doing our draft profiles,
yeah, that's true.
He's up there in a lot of the tight end categories, like top 5, top 3, both in career and for the single season marks. So to his credit, he got pretty close to breaking those records. But yeah, I mean, he's an honestly guy I'm a little surprised didn't get any more draft hype than he got. Like, didn't get a combine invite, and there never really was buzz around him. Because you think any big tight end that's athletic and can catch like he can would be intriguing. But that just never materialized for. Plus, he was coached by a former NFL coach and Blaine Stewart. I always thought he was the one weird guy. I always thought it was just weird that no draft hype materialized around him.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, I guess.
Also,
yeah,
he got signed within like the first hour after the draft, so obviously people did like him.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I don't know if I would have thought he was going to get drafted just for the fact that it wasn't like he was a superstar. It wasn't overall in college football. It wasn't like he was. I mean, Tyler Warren wasn't even the first tight end taken.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of slid a little bit too. So it's not like this was a draft that was going to have 7-8 tight ends or anything like that. So I don't think teams had to rush to take him. But yeah, he was signed quickly. He was always going to get on a team. He was kind of like Beanie. We're okay. Maybe you could argue he didn't get drafted, but he never was going to have to worry that he wouldn't at least get a camp invite. And he's signed. So congrats to him. Cody Nespor again, Mike Asti, Mountaineer Report. Again, find us everywhere you get your podcasts and our coverage at WV Sports Now. I do want to segue into the current Mountaineers, now coached by Rich Rodriguez. Neil Brown, that tenure is over. Those players are over. It's now all about Rich Rod. And originally, he was bringing in mostly guys that he had to elevate from lower levels. He did have to bring in a lot of transfers and was open that he was going to bring in a lot of transfers. We talked on our last show before the holiday that a lot of misreporting was out there. He would say throughout the spring, I'm going to cut 20-plus guys. I got to get under the roster limit. I want to do it now. I don't want to wait. We need to also add different depth pieces, etc. We're going to be doing an evaluation. Some of these guys may not make the team. I wish I could keep them, but there's roster limits, all of that. The national media didn't hear it, didn't want to hear it. A lot of misreporting existed. We still have the full-on list of players that were cut on the site. Some chose to leave outside of that, but 90% of them were cut. He's starting to slowly replace those guys, and now recently getting some Power 4 transfers, a running back, an offensive lineman, looking at others. What's your overall thought right now on what he's doing in the portal? Because it's year one. He was open that this is going to be an evaluation year. I know I have to win right away and I can't have a 3-8 season, but I also am going to evaluate, and it might be a weird off season. You do have a portal. He doesn't love the spring portal, because that's why I didn't do the spring game, but it exists, and he's going to use it to add. Indiana and Kirksonetti, they had a lot of spring guys last year when they had a great first-year turnaround. It wasn't just from the winter. He did add some in the winter, Rich Rod, but he also cut some of those players, as weird as that ended up being. Obviously, there's a quarterback battle and a lot of question marks around this roster and what it's going to become, but bringing in receivers, bringing in linemen, bringing in linebackers to help depth there, that was a major problem the last several years. Defensive backs, elevating some guys from FCS and Group of 5, but also now slowly bringing in Power 4 transfers. These are guys that maybe had injuries last year or whatever, but he's now beating out some other Power 4 schools for some of these players. It looks like it's turning on a little bit and almost under the radar from what basketball was doing. But Rich Rodriguez is kind of under the radar, having a solid at least last week from, before the show here during the holiday.
Yeah. I think it seems it seems like a good spring portal so far, right? It just on paper it seems like, but it is like I was trying to do it last week, just trying to keep up with there's so many moving parts. it's and the guys that transfer in like the winter and have already transferred out, it's I don't know. There's so many moving parts. I find it very difficult even more difficult than, say a month ago before the spring. I find it very difficult to project this team now, right? Because it's like there are so many guys that are like, oh, he should be good, but maybe hasn't played a lot, and it seems like a roster full of those guys, right, Mike's? And so it seems good, right? Like on paper, it seems good, but I struggled to really like if you and when the schedule came out, you and I went through it. I would really struggle to do that now. I don't know. I just because
we're gonna have to do it again. I was figuring we'd have to do it again at some point. Yeah,
it's just I wish we could have seen the team more in spring, right? Just to get an idea for a lot of these guys. I think that's where my hang up is. Like, I see the names, I see their previous schools, I see their stats. I don't know what these guys are like.
Yeah, but then if we did that, we would have watched them, and then he would have cut him. So then at least we'd be able to tell the fan, okay, I agree, this guy sucked. Yeah. He got cut. I know why he got cut. But yeah, I mean, again, so it's cut so many players that the concern was, and there was a lot of misreporting nationally, but I think the valid concern was, yes, Rich Rod, maybe this guy isn't hard edge, but it's harder than you think to get players, even with more money now. Yeah. They change their mind every day. If this is a fringe depth piece, you're hurting depth. Like, for example, you bring in a power 4 tight end in the winter. That was nationally viewed as a solid ad, the guy from Iowa. He gets cut. He then gets cut a month and a half later. And Jack Samarco, who's the player that kind of was a question mark, he left after the cut situation, and it looks like that was a different scenario. Maybe, I even heard from some coaches that he also maybe was cut as well. But there's wondering, what the hell did he do then? Because you're done practice. He wasn't on the original list. He then maybe would get cut a couple days later, or even if he chose to leave, that's off a conversation between you and him. You went into the Easter holiday with no tight ends, really. Like, it feels like there's a little bit of, and this is where the criticism could exist with Rich Rod. We will see how it goes, Cody. I get why he was hired. He's a borderline Hall of Fame coach. I'm rooting for him. I like talking to him. I think he's matured. I think he's different than he was before, and there's no hang up in 2007 for me. But the only thing that we're seeing a little bit now that could be a criticism if they have a bad year is he has that old school mindset of, if you're not hard edge, if you're not doing it the way I want, you're gone. When some other coaches might say, especially in this era, you're a little bit, not doing what I want, but I can't afford to have no tight ends. Like, I got to have someone. So I'm going to give a little latitude to a top recruit like Samarka was, or a power 4 transfer ad. It does appear like Rich Rod is, the same thing when everyone was freaking out of Hudson Clement. Rich Rod kept on saying publicly, no, not literally to Clement, but just in general, player leaves, no sweat. He's not going to force anybody to stay that doesn't want to be there. Not going to convince anybody. He's not going to, this is what you got to offer. You don't like it, too bad. And it's a risky play. That's a risky mentality in this era. It really, really is. You can complain about all you want that he's upset about the portal windows and there's no locking in of rosters, and maybe we'll get there in the future if they really become like the NFL, because, again, we've talked about even the NFL, players are not free agents twice a year, and you have to have a 1-year contract to be a free agent even every year. Usually those, you're not. Usually you have a several-year contract. But that's not the case today, and he had to do a lot of work in the portal. I do think recently he's doing a little, like Kingston, for example. I think he's doing a little bit more work in the portal, getting a powerful running back to help out Jaheim, somebody with more size who has experience getting yards in the power 4. That's a big deal. He did get a receiver from North Carolina, so that's a power 4 ad there. There are other players that have been productive, whether they're at a lower level or power four, that he's bringing aboard. We're waiting for a lot of these guys to sign too. Commitments don't mean as much as signing, obviously, and we have the list, by the way. We do have a full-on list of WV Sports Now. I've been keeping up with it, a tracker of just the spring portal work of who they've added. Can Draven try to find the exact number right now? I think it's been good recently, but it's very hard to predict this team. And if this team does not end up with a good year, I think an immediate, easy criticism, Cody, is going to be, was Rich Rod a little too old school in the offseason that makes it hard on recruiting? And should he have cut as many players as he cut? I know he cut them. National media can argue he didn't. He cut them. They didn't all choose to leave. But did he cut too many? That's a lot of players to cut when you're at year one.
Yeah, and that was my concern when we did this show after that was, these guys probably aren't difference makers, but it hurts your depth and stuff. And I think the concern I voiced was like, can you, to a man, bring in guys who are better than these guys, right? And I think if you look at who they've brought in this spring, they've brought in guys, like you said, from Power Four who have played a little bit. And that's why I think it's been a very good spring.
I think they're at 11 right now on my math for the commits. At least.
I think if they had gone out and they cut these 20 guys and they're having to replace them with FCS guys or junior college guys.
That's how it was at first, but it's not that now.
Or I think that would have been a big red flag of like, oh no, what did he do? Like, there's not going to be. I think to be able to refill the bottom of the roster with guys from Power Four schools, guys that have played, have any stats at all. I think that's, like I said, a really good sign this spring. And I don't, I do still think there is maybe the possibility of like you said, the tight ends, like you're going to be cutting it close to get a guy that you like and are willing to play. Not that, Rich Rod.
I'll put it out there too.
Traditionally played a lot of tight ends.
I almost forgot. They did bring in Grayson Barnes. So they do have a tight end. They did bring in one tight end from the transfer wire here in the spring. I have it on the site. But, Cody, again, you cut a Power Four transfer addition tight end. Granted, he was just a blocker, but still, you cut a Power Four transfer ad. The tight end you did not cut is from Jacksonville State, so a lower level program. Samarco, who you were thinking you were going to bank on for a minute, people thought he maybe could even be a starter. He then leaves or gets cut a few days later, and you bring in a guy from Northern Illinois. It is hard to believe when you're saying, did you replace these guys with either equal or better? Because if they're lateral moves and you prefer the personality, fine, you're the coach. It's hard to argue out of all positions. You could say offensive line is deeper now. I agree. You could say D-line's deeper now. I agree. You could say defensive back just needs help from anybody, really. You could say receiver maybe is deeper now. I think tight end, you could argue you regressed. I mean, I find it hard to argue that the tight end position is better off. And if you're not going to be a pass catcher, you're at least going to be a blocker in a run-first offense. And I don't know if you remember this press conference, Cody, but Rich Rod publicly offered, and he does not like talking about things publicly, his scheme or players or whatever, but he publicly offered, this offense now will utilize the tight end more than it did before. I've changed the tight end thinking. There'll be more pass catchers now. He offered all of that. Who's going to do that? So you're doing that with who? And why would you say that? And then the next week turn around and cut a guy who could do it. And then the blocker who was going to try to work into doing that. I mean, the whole commentary when he originally added the blocking tight end was, we'll make him into more of a complete tight end. Maybe that didn't work after a month or so, but that's a position that he's really playing with. It almost seems like that whoever is a tight end on his roster, I wouldn't get too comfortable. Like, that's just, Rich Rod does not love the tight end situation right now. I would not imagine.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's one of the dangers of this spring portal, right? Of like, it's kind of your last chance, right? Like, this is the last time you really get to add players. So if you're playing with fire a little bit when you lose Samarco, you lose the kid from Iowa, both of them who you thought were going to play, and I don't want to say you get desperate, but it is like, okay, it's down to it now. Get somebody, and maybe it's all smoke and they're not actually going to use a tight end more than he has in the past, right? I mean, wouldn't be the first time. Wouldn't be the first time. Even recently that West Virginia coaches talk up a tight end that doesn't materialize. Right, Mike? How many times did we hear Neil Brown say Traylon Davis is going to catch a bunch of passes?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. No, 100%. Yeah.
So, I mean, if this was like offensive tackle and they have like one guy, maybe I think you could panic. But when it's tight end and Rich Rod hasn't traditionally used one, it doesn't worry me as much. But I think, like I said, I think it does show that this spring portal isn't like a Band-Aid, right? It is like it's still a big risk to go into the spring portal with glaring needs because there's not a guarantee that right there's going to be the right guys in there or just the right opportunities to fill them. So I don't know.
I mean, the portal is a blessing in could be a blessing in disguise, but it also could really, really hurt you. I mean, it works both ways. It really does. It's a double-edged sword, especially in year one, because in year one, and Kirsten did this and it really worked out for him. Obviously, he made the playoff in year one with a program that rarely wins in football. You need to do an overhaul. So if you're doing an overhaul, Cody, wouldn't you love as many opportunities to overhaul that thing as possible? I mean, maybe secretly you won 3 or 4 portals because you're trying things out. You're doing an overhaul. Yeah, you don't want to lose guys, and it's risky when you have all these portals, and that's a whole nother show and whole nother debate. But he probably liked being able to do the evaluation thing. If there was no spring portal and he signed, a lot of these players were even signed that he then cut in December. So he kind of would have been just shafted with a team that maybe he didn't recruit a lot of those guys or they were forced upon him because some of those players that he ended up cutting, Cody, if you remember, after Brown got fired, to Brown's credit, being Mr. Good Guy, he helped keep some of those players for that recruiting class. A lot of them were freshmen. He helped keep them at West Virginia, even though he was not going to be there. I know the assistant coaches even tried to do that before they were officially let go. Credit to those recruiters, that staff, Brown and company. They did a lot of work, and West Virginia landed, a normal 40, maybe a little better for some outlets, recruiting class despite just firing a coach. I mean, people were shell-shocked nationally. They literally had better recruiting ranks than Pitt, and they just fired a coach, and Pitt has a coach who's been there now 9 years. And that was just a surprising thing, and to Brown's credit, good for him to do that, because otherwise they would have had nobody. And that was, they didn't have a whole hoopla for the signing day, but they still were able to do a regular signing day a little bit, and those players got opportunity. And about half of them, Rich Rod turned around and cut. And he wasn't a part of those initial meetings. So maybe he, eventually looked at them on the field and was like, yeah, Neil, thanks for giving us a good signing day, but this guy's not going to work for me. They're different coaches. Doesn't even mean that he's trying to trash Neil. He's publicly said, he's a good coach. I don't want to make this hating Neil Brown thing. So you get here. He might have liked being able to evaluate and do that because he didn't want to be forced to just work with another coach's guys. But you also maybe could have the mindset, Cody, that maybe this is where it bites you. Maybe he's thinking a little too much of evaluation. I don't want to have to teach you more than 2 days. Evaluation, you're cut. We got another portal coming up. Whereas you play with it too much. Like, I mean, how many lateral moves can you make? I mean, you just play with it too much. Maybe you use it as too much of a crutch. Know it's coming in front of you too much. And then you do happen to cut a guy that if you work with a little bit longer, he could have been as equal as the guy you're bringing in. So, and then there's not continuity there. So it works both ways. And for looking at the numbers, by the way, they did cut a lot more players than they've added so far in the spring portal. That was always going to be the case because they had to do a lot of the cuts to get under the roster limit. They don't want to get over the limit again. So shouldn't have to say that. But for anyone out there who wants to report, they cut 25, they're only adding 11. That's not good. That, let's not run amok. Like initially the reports existed with the cuts that no one wanted to agree that they were cutting, or at least people that weren't sitting in the room didn't report that way. Though a lot of those players were cut, and we get here, but they've added a lot of players that could be something. They're question marks now, and recently there's some Power 4 ads with still some offers out. So you don't know how this roster is going to look, but I think there's reason for optimism, at least recently. And this also has to show people that, as Ren Baker has been saying, there clearly is more money there if they're beating out Power 4s and they're getting Power 4 transfers. Doesn't mean these players are guaranteed to be surefire stars, but they're getting a little bit more of them in recent years, and you got to pay to to play. I mean, literally speaking. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report. We want to wrap the show with the by far best program out of the three we'll be talking about on this program. And one of the better programs of all of Mountaineer athletics. They could argue as the best program at WVU right now. You want to go to men's soccer, you want to go certainly rifle winning a national championship, definitely. But the WVU baseball program, they're having a historic season in their own right. They are ranked in the top 10, in the top 5 in multiple major polls. They are ranked in every single major poll, and there's a separation there. D1 has them 16. They're at 8, I believe, Baseball America. They're at 4 in Perfect Game. They're there, though. And another conference sweep last weekend. They did lose to Penn State and snap the winning streak, but they eventually were just going to lose at some point there. They're certainly going to be a postseason team. They're certainly going to make the tournament. They are going to likely shatter their single season wins record. They would really, really have to have an historic West Virginia-like collapse to not make that happen. I mean, it would arguably be the greatest collapse in Mountaineer athletics if they would, because they would be losing more than half of their remaining games. So they're likely going to set the single season win record, which is a great thing for Steve Saban's in year one. People think this is a deeper team than even last year when they went to a super regional. If they set the wins record, what does that do for them in terms of the history of the WVU baseball program? There are some who believe that if you do that, you already are the best team in program history for baseball. There are others who say, well, while they would have more overall wins and a better record than what happened a couple years ago, that team did win a Big 12 title. That is a big deal. I like having a trophy. That team did not show up in the conference tournament, though. That was regular season. So if this team shows up in the conference tournament, that would then be better. That's a benchmark they got to hit. Last year's team went to super regional. This year's team losing in the regional or not getting there or not getting a super regional, that would then be worse. I care more about the postseason than just a single season wins bar. How do you evaluate this? Where would this season rank if they get the wins record and then that's where we are? What do they need to do in the postseason to be the best team ever? Or is that enough?
So the wins record is 40. They're at 37 already.
Yeah.
There's 11 regular season games left, plus all the postseason games.
There's no way they don't.
All the Big 12 tournament, all the regional games.
Yeah.
They're gonna. You said it. They're gonna shatter the single season wins record. They are absolutely on the fast track to hosting a regional for just the second time ever at Kendrick Family Ballpark. I think they are in. I think they are firmly in best team in program history territory right now. Because last year the first super regional appearance, right? Like on the doorstep of the College World Series.
So do you deem last year's or do you deem the year before? The year before they set the wins record and won the Big 12. Last year's they went to super regional. Which one is better? Because before last year's super regional, people thought it was disappointing. They did not win it. They did not repeat in the Big 12. They puttered away the tournament. Once again, they didn't have as many wins. They had some upset losses. They went further in the postseason, but this maybe gets into a whole debate in sports culture, Cody. Is a team that has a great regular season, but then that has a bad week and a half, is that really a worse team than a team that has an average regular season and then gets hot in a postseason, but that team ends up being a champion? That's kind of where this falls. But where are you in the last 2 years for West Virginia?
I would favor last year.
Okay.
Because I don't think that – I think that team had high expectations. I think they lived up to them. I remember J.J. Weatherholt was hurt for a little bit.
Right.
And so when you look at, why don't they have the wins record? Well, JJ was hurt for a few weeks.
Sure.
But I don't think that team disappointed at all. And they had, JJ had massive expectation. He didn't play great in the super regional, but
they won there without him playing well. That is true. 100%.
Top 10 draft pick, should have been a Golden Spikes finalist. I would argue that till I'm blue in the face. Insane that he wasn't.
But it didn't hurt him professional wise. The draft
No,
stock, like
yeah.
we talked about with the football players, it
Yeah.
almost appeared like his last season was just gravy, and MLB teams were
Yeah.
like, we like you regardless. He proved himself already.
Yeah. So, you know, I would, even without the wins record, I'd say last year probably the best in team history. But like, if they break the record, if they host a regional for just the second time ever this year, if they were to win and go on and go
What
to
if they
another
host a
super
regional and lose?
I still think hosting a regional would capitalize on the excitement around the program so effectively. I
Yeah, but you
still
know how
think it would be
Mountaineer fans
positive,
are. If they
right?
see them walking off the field a loser
I
at home,
know,
they would look at that as
but
a choke job. They would look at it as a choke job. You know they would.
But I just, yeah,
And they're very good at home too, so it would be very unlike how this team plays.
I know. I think getting that atmosphere in Morgantown again.
Oh, it'd be wonderful. Yeah,
100%. With how much momentum the program has, getting that atmosphere in Morgantown again, I just think would capitalize so much on it that even a big disappointment wouldn't take so much away from it that I would say rate the season off.
But do you think?
It's
no, I hear what you're saying, but you also know how the program works, and I'm not going to do it here, but I could have a whole rant that they don't promote the whole athletic department, certainly football, enough in terms of their history. I feel like if they lost at home, the people that we know that are in those meetings would not allow that to be billed as the best team in program history. They would cling on last year. They would want a trophy or winning in the postseason. I don't think they would if they're going to do a wall or a mural. I don't think they would put this a loser at home on that mural or wall. That is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is like, they're in first place in the Big 12 with a couple games in hand. Like they could win another Big 12 regular season title if they win the Big 12 tournament, which they're terrible in the Big 12 tournament.
That would be a big deal. That would be
if they could go down and win the Big 12 tournament. I don't know.
Even show up at all. Like even show up.
I know. I just think there's so much positive momentum with the program that
100%.
I want to believe. I want to believe in the fan base that it's not like hanging on a thread. I mean, the last regional they hosted had the worst ending ever. Right? You lose on a walk-off grand slam.
I remember.
Right? And like that didn't derail the program's only gotten better since then. So and I'm not in my mind. I think getting back to that point with the team that's even better, with the team that's set. I just think there would be so many positives that I have to believe the fan base wouldn't, just or even the university wouldn't just write it off. And there would be banners and there would be appropriate fanfare. And
to make it clear, I'm sure now first off, based on what they did 2 years ago. They win a Big 12 regular season title. The program's clearly going to put a banner up. They're going to celebrate it. They're going to have a trophy. They're going to all take a picture. They're going to get a ring. I mean, they got a Big 12 championship ring from just doing that a couple years ago. And that was when they backpedaled into it. And technically, they got a share of it. They didn't win it outright. So I know there's some fans who didn't even want it, but the program decided we are celebrating this. And it is, as they should. I mean, that is a part of it. Another annoyance. Like if you claim or you share or you're equal with somebody, you have just as much a right to it as somebody else. So if they're going to do it, you should do it, keeping up with the Joneses. And that's what they did with baseball 2 years ago. That was the right call. I will defend that. I think, you have a share of a Big 12 title. If the other programs are going to say they're a Big 12 champ, then you best believe you should. Okay. That is the case. They fell into it, but they didn't have a better record than you. And then you didn't show up in the conference tournament, so that does leave a little stain in your mouth to that year, but then you have the wins record, and that was a big step for the program. Last year, you could say, okay, we didn't get any more trophies, but JJ was hurt, and we got to Super Regional, so that's a step for the program. Going into this year of year one with Saban's and all the pressure to keep it going from what Maisie built up, Cody, the only two things, well, three, but two of them are realistic, that you could achieve to make it really better in year one for Saban's would be the three things would be, really vying for a national championship, which I think they're still a little bit away from really doing. The other would be winning a Big 12 conference tournament, not just regular season. It would, it counts as a Big 12 title in a regular season, but a conference tournament would almost be respected even more. Certainly if you could do both in the same year. And then the other is what you talked about, win or lose, just hosting a regional, because despite the success of the last 2 years, they didn't get to do as much in front of their fans as they would have liked.
Yeah.
So those things are what to do. And so far, it looks like the regular season title, they're going to check it off. They're going to do another one of those. Conference tournament, we'll see. And I will say, Cody, if you remember, the only criticism that really could ever exist for Randy Mazey, Hall of Fame coach, deserved, celebrated, built the program up, Hall of Fame coach, no matter what Sabins does, he's always going to be celebrated. Sabins could win a natty, and Mazey's going to be the guy who, without him, I wouldn't be here. I guarantee that'll be said in the post-game presser. So Mazey deserves tons of credit. Don't get me wrong. The one thing that he was open with that I think is the stain is he always would say, especially after winning the regular season title, going into the conference tournament, kind of paraphrasing, we know we're in the dance. We got a trophy. We're not going to kill ourselves for this conference tournament. We're kind of gearing up for the NCAA. We're gearing up for the real postseason. He would sometimes not even throw his big guns in some of those games. He wouldn't care about it. The way he managed the Big 12 conference tournament, Cody, it was just not like somebody who really wanted to win that thing. It was somebody who like, okay, if we win it, great. If we don't, no big deal. We got the regular season. We got the playoffs. That's what we want to worry about. There were a lot of fans who said, like, you're really not going to win a national championship with the way baseball is structured. I'd like to win a conference tournament. That would be a gigantic deal. You have a team of MLB players. Don't punt it because you're worried about a regional coming up. And it kind of was like he would do that a little bit because he wanted to give his team a rest. I would be interested to see what Saban's mentality is. Does he want 2 trophies, or is he okay with 1 and going to try to win regionals? I not that he doesn't want to win regionals anyway, but I would wonder what his mentality is. If he goes guns blazing, meaning does he tinker the rotation to rest a guy, or does he say, no, my top starters pitching to open up this Big 12 tournament, I want to win this damn thing. I'm not going to rest him and have him not used or etc. I'm going to use my pen. I'm going to use multiple guys. I want to win this thing. Mazey would basically, it's one reliever and we don't care and let's go to the regional. I'd like to see what Sabins does. They're not the same people. They're different guys. His first presser was, I respect Mazey, but I'm not Mazey. It's going to be different managing. I'd like to see what his strategy is in the Big 12 tournament. And I would imagine that somebody's going to even ask it in some type of respectful way to Mazey, like, how much do you care? How much weight are you going to put on this? What does the regional influence this strategy here? Because it's a quick turnaround. But I think the fan base, I'll speak from the fan base, Cody. I think the fan base wants to go ahead and win that Big 12 tournament. Mm-hmm. So I think if he sits there and does amazing, like, we're going to, it's not the end of the world. Like, we might do some resting here. We're looking at the regional. I think he's going to go for it, but I don't think that would be what the fans want. I think the fans want as many trophies as they can freaking get.
Yeah. I think that is the one. Well, first of all, you talked about, the transition to Sabins. I think if we're talking about just how this season should be perceived, the fact that,
it's a good year.
They transitioned to a new head coach. Yeah. They lost their best player. The fact that this team is even better than the last 2 years is an achievement all on its own. I mean, they could have gone 500 this year, and it kind of would have been like, well, it's a new head coach, blah, 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 blah. For them to be even better, I think is a great accomplishment. And I think you're right. I think the one glaring criticism of Mazey is they were terrible. Like I said, they were terrible in the Big 12 tournament almost every year. And he did always get cute with his starting pitchers because he kind of wanted to game it a little bit and be strategic. But it was almost like he forgot, hey, you got to win the first few rounds to get strategic and game it. And I remember the one year, it would have been Jackson Wolf's senior year. I believe they played Texas in the first round, and he pitched Jackson, and they won because he pitched like a masterpiece. And then they got to the second round, and he just kind of threw his arms up like, we'll just throw, everybody out there and see if we can make it work. And it's like, why was this the plan for the tournament, right? Like, that's not the plan. So I do think that's the one criticism of Mazey is, and I don't know, like you said, I don't know if he certainly didn't take it as seriously as the years when they made a regional. It will be that will be interesting to see how Saban's differs there, because I think that is a spot where it's stylistically it's still a lot looks like Maisie ball, right? The play on the field still looks a lot like Maisie ball. I do think that's one area, how he handles a tournament. I think that could be drastically different, and I really hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it. But that will be interesting to see, how does he set up the rotation for the Big 12 tournament? How does he handle a rotation for whatever regional they end up in? I do think that's, like I said, that's the one area where maybe there is the most change just in mentality and on how they approach that.
Yeah, and I'd be very interested to see. I mean, even how he would handle a question like that, because the reason why I bring that up, and there was a lot of paraphrasing there. I don't have the quotes in front of me from what Maisie said in the past. Maisie was basically honest that this is not the end of the world if we don't win a conference tournament. I want to go ahead and do it in the regional, and especially after they already had a regular season title. Like it was easy to read into it the way he worked the rotation and worked the pitchers, but he was not giving it his all for the conference tournament, and the results were there. They were elite teams that would then continuously disappoint in those conference tournaments, and I don't think they were all choke jobs. I think that was just not the emphasis on we needing to win this. But when you think about it, Cody, the elite programs in that sport, they stack them all. So you're not gonna hear anybody in the SEC saying we don't care about the conference tournament because we're going to the regional. They're gonna say, I want to win that, I want to win that, and I want to win that. I want to win regular season, conference tournament, and the Natty, and then I'm the best. So it was odd a little bit to me to have a head coach presiding over a top 25 program, a program that had MLB players, that was very much a national contender, that was a Hall of Fame coach, that would kind of publicly say, here's my ranking of what I care about, and this conference tournament is not high on the priority list. Yeah. That just was a little odd. I mean, that he didn't even give us the coach speak. I like talking to Maisie. He was very honest. He's like, I maybe use opportunity to rest this guy here. We got the regional coming up. It's like, this isn't an exhibition game. This is not an exhibition. Like this game counts. The trophy can be won. It would be great to do it. So, and I think especially the year they backed in and they end up sharing the regular season, that was the year the fans really were like, man, we got a share of a title now. We backed into it, and now we're kind of punting a conference tournament. What are we doing? And of course, the next year you go to a super regional, no one's mad. But we'll see what happens this year. I think it'll be Cody, I guess we'll wrap it this way. If we're sitting here in July and we are able to have a legitimate debate on, are you the best team in program history for just setting a wins record versus going to a super regional versus winning a conference title? I mean, the program's looking fine. I mean, that's a good debate to be having. Obviously, those are 3 great years, and at minimum, they've happened regular season title.
And they've happened consecutively, right? Is this the best season in program history, or was it last season, or was it the season before that? Like that's
right.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. Like, and you being the coach in Saban's, not only you're leading this one, and you were on the staff of the other one, so it's like you're good if you're Saban's as well. So yeah, I mean, but you know how the fans will work. I mean, as much as the wins record will be great, it's the way they end up getting things done. I think if they're going to lose in a regional, they're better off not doing it at home. I think the fan base will remember it more negatively if they do blow it at home. I hate to tell you that, Cody. I don't want to be Mr. Negative here and pop your balloon of butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns for the fans. But I do feel that if they end up, with a poor showing at home, that'll be remembered by fans, even though this is a great team and a great season because they have been so good at home. Otherwise, that'll feel like a WVU choking type of thing. If they go on the road, it might just, okay, they're getting screwed by the system, and we're with them, and they're a great team nonetheless. There's also a possibility here. It's a real possibility when you watch this team play. We got to say this. With how they're playing and how deep they are offensively and even winning games as a pitching staff, Cody, there's a real possibility they lock up the regular season title again. They go ahead and win a conference tournament, and they go ahead and win a regional at home, and then they go ahead and maybe even win a super regional. Like, this is a real good team. They could just win all this.
Yeah, that's probably what you and I haven't talked about enough. Is like, it's unbelievable how good this team is.
They're that good. They could win all these things.
It's they got dinged so early because of their easy schedule. And I wasn't buying into it super early. I was listening to Baseball America Says, and watching them now, like it's just so systematic. They just beat their Big 12 opponents like every game, and there's not a ton of drama, and it's just it's just they're like a well-oiled baseball machine, and they just go out and beat everybody. It's very impressive, and like I said, it's almost to you move on from the best coach in program history. You move on from I'm going to say the second best hitter because I think Jed Jerko was the best hitter. The second best hitter in program history, coming off the most successful postseason run in program history to have this. It's just like unbelievable. If there wasn't a basketball coach search and Rich Prada wasn't back, this would be the absolute talk of the town.
So you'd like to think so. It's baseball versus football and basketball in Morgantown. Like,
but
football being
Neil
bad is going to get discussed more than
Neil
baseball
was
being
still
good.
here and Darren was still here. Would Morgantown be buzzing about Neil still, or would they be latching on to this baseball team?
As I've been telling you, even with what's going on with the women's basketball program, the WVU fan, especially those in Morgantown, they want. Here's the ranking, and it doesn't matter about history. They want football success number 1. They want men's basketball success number 2, and everyone else is way lower.
I'm just saying, if it was a quieter off season.
Yeah, although this is quieter than any of the other 3 years. So in recent memory, so if you want quiet, this is quieter than last year, quieter than the year before, quieter than even before the streak that we're talking about here. So yeah, but maybe they like this. I mean, honestly, Cody, it's almost a little bit ho hum. I mean, I'll even let everyone know Griffin Floyd does a lot of our baseball recaps for us throughout the Sports Now Network and the WVSM. He's flat told me many times, like, I'm running out of ways to describe WVU winning baseball-wise and pulling games out. And it almost feels like, too, you hate to say this and throw a jinx on here, Cody. It almost feels like they're destined for some stuff here because they are just finding ways to win games that sometimes they should not win, and a team of the past would have lost. Like they are either coming back late, they are holding on late, they are in a tie scenario, then all of a sudden there's a home run. They're on Sports Center for a crazy play for fooling an opponent every other week. Like they're getting on there where it's like, wow, they do a hidden ball trick. Like they're stealing home to win a game. This team has won a game about every way you possibly can win a game this year. Cody, they're so good that maybe this actually lends credence to maybe the fans handling this appropriately, no matter how it ends. I'll say this. I was wondering how this would be received. When they lost to Penn State, who's not a rival, but they're in the region, and they're not as good. Yeah, and they lost it on the road. That was after a winning streak, and they finally got ranked. I thought a lot of the fans would be like, oh, no, now they're blowing it. They should never have lost the game. Now we're not going to get ranked again. The fan base handled it of, no big deal. We're really good. Yeah. We lost. Like, you didn't want to lose. It was a road game. Program's still better than Penn State's baseball program. Didn't come back at the end. Almost came back. We're going to go ahead and sweep UCF and stay in the rankings. That was the mentality of the fans. And that's exactly what they did. And that is not a common West Virginia mentality because those fans usually expect the worst. And that is how good this team is. And that is how good the program's been, that they are indoctrinating the fans to be like, no, you're not going to win every game, but if we get upset, we'll win the next day. Like that is how good this program is right now. So maybe the fans will be able to handle this appropriately either way. I think worst case scenario is losing regional at home, though. I think if you're there, you got to win.
Yeah.
But in all reality, it's still a great season.
The clip from the UCF game on Saturday from this weekend, when I don't know if you saw it, Mike, the Sam White grounded out to first, and the pitcher, the UCF pitcher, fielded it and started talking trash and didn't know how many outs there were, and WVU was able to like steal home basically. Yeah. That's my favorite clip of the year. It's just so goofy, and that's the thing where it's like that's not West Virginia doing anything, but it's just UCF. It's my favorite clip. It's so good. I've watched it many times. It's so good.
But that's where you get to kind of like the best thing because they're just getting lucky and finding crazy ways to win. Like that's not you necessarily being better. That's just like you walk on the field and you just end up with more luck than the other opponent, and that happens so often for this team.
And that's what I mean. Like that's what I mean. It's like they're just a well-oiled machine. They just roll up and like they had the hidden ball trick you mentioned earlier this
Yeah.
season. It's I don't know. Like I'm a big believer. Like you make your own luck, and they just like
They do.
they don't make a lot of mistakes. They just I don't know. I think a lot of that comes from they play well. Every game it's not a roller coaster. It's just they play well every game, and so a lot of luck has gone their way this season. And if I was when they backed into the Big 12 regular season title a couple years ago, which they did, they
backed into it. Yeah, 100%.
They had to. Their last series was at Texas, and I believe they got swept.
Yeah, I think if they would have won, won even one game, they would have at least got it outright. Yeah, would have got it outright. Yeah, I believe.
This year,
they won the series.
This year they end against Kansas here in Morgantown. So assuming they don't clinch it before that series, that could be a really special weekend. If they're able to clinch a Big 12 title here at home. But yeah, interesting. They're fun to watch. I can't recommend enough, even if you're not a baseball person. Try it out. I'm sure you have ESPN Plus.
Or go down there if you live in Morgantown. They're setting records every game.
Well,
they're setting records every game with attendance.
Might be tough to get tickets, honestly.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but there's going to be, because they know they're going to be people there regardless. They're setting records every game. So yeah, they're but honestly, they're so good. And I wasn't there for this game, but I even saw some clips. There seems to be even almost a contingent of fans that even if they don't get a ticket, they're almost like tailgating in the parking lot, because there's barbecue trucks that pull up now. That's smart for the food trucks to show up. Okay, maybe you don't go in, maybe you do, and buy some food and stand outside. There's people just want to have the experience just being in the parking lot, and it's not on campus. It's just another spot in Morgantown versus even going in. Ross Hodge got hired and wanted to land and get to a Mountaineer baseball game. Didn't even want to worry about doing the job yet. So that shows you where they're gaining some steam nationally, that he already was sold. So yeah, this baseball program obviously is clicking on all cylinders. Saban's has done a great job so far keeping it going, even though he didn't recruit all of these players and he did take over from Maisie. It's easier said than done to keep this moving. The expectations were really, really high, and a lot of fans, and it sounded unnecessary, I was telling them so, that after the Super Regional, there were people saying, regional or bust every year, Super Regional or bust every year, or it's bad now. That's getting a little unreasonable, but they could do all of it again this season. And I think at least if you show up in the conference tournament, certainly if you win another regular season title with a wins record, and then some games, I mean, they prove they can be anybody and do it anywhere, really, and they're not phased by any road trip, and they've traveled, and they've been able to win, and they've rebounded from bad losses, and they have another one against Marshall. They have the couple conference games that you mentioned. The schedule's dwindling down now, and they're definitely going to be a relevant team nationally. So it is amazing to have that locked up, and I am sure the program's going to celebrate it in general, but it will, because there'll be articles and they kind of evaluate these things and try to promote it in a certain way. It'll be interesting what the debate will be and how it'll be promoted if they end up with the wins record and maybe a regular season title being it. They do nothing in the playoffs, because you do have a Super Regional to, in all reality, you want to win in the playoffs. So if a team gets a Super Regional, that likely is going to be the best team in program history unless someone else gets there or beyond. But I think getting there, you obviously would overtake last year's team. Getting there and losing again, you'd overtake them, because you're doing more in the regular season, and it's unlikely you're going to have a top 5 draft pick here, but they're doing it with even a deeper team and a collective group. And many of these players will be back next year as well. Make sure to hit up our coverage at WV Sports Now of all of Mountaineer athletics. Of course, football, men's basketball usually reigns supreme, but the baseball program is a team that maybe wins some type of title this calendar year within the next month or two. So get excited and lock into that. And also you can find Mountaineer Report here, available on YouTube, but also available everywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. For Cody Nespor, I'm Mike Asti, and not as much drama, but a lot of things for Mountaineer fans to check in on. A lot of news, a lot of things to consume and enjoy in the spring and going into the summer for WVU fan.